Ansible can be installed on any Linux OS. For this tutorial, we will be using a fresh Ubuntu LTS 20.04. A download link to the latest LTS will be provided in the description. First things first, we're going to install Ansible using apt. To be able to do this, however, we first need to use the add-apt-repository command to add the repository of Ansible. This command is part of the software properties common package. This package will usually be installed during your first apt install, but since it's a fresh install, we don't have it yet. This command can be found in the description of this video. Now that we can add repositories for apt to access, let's add Ansible's repository. Once again, the command can be found in the description. Now installing Ansible is as easy as simply typing sudo apt install Ansible. Since in this tutorial we are discussing how to configure Windows hosts, we will also need to use WinRM, since using SSH is still experimental for Windows with Ansible. WinRM stands for Windows Remote Management. It is a protocol for managing Windows machines remotely, similar to SSH. Support for WinRM connections can be obtained by downloading the Python package pywinrm. Remember how I said Ansible was written in Python? Assuming that pip is not yet installed, we will first install it using apt. After installing pip, we can use it to install pywinrm. We are installing any version after 0.2.2, as that version added support for what we are trying to do. Now that everything is installed on our Ubuntu Ansible server, we will look at how to make the Windows client reachable. The first step of this is, in my very slow VM here, to open PowerShell with administrator rights so that I can download and run a PowerShell script, the command of which has been provided by Ansible. Doing this setup manually is a quite involved process and unfortunately out of scope for this tutorial. This command can of course once again be found in the description. The script that is being run does the following four things. It enables WinRM service and firewall exceptions. It allows remote login of local users. It creates HTTP and HTTPS listeners for WinRM. And it generates a self-signed certificate for the HTTPS connection. The internet security conscious among you will already have started to worry at hearing the last point on the list. With good reason, of course. If you want to deploy Ansible to configure Windows host using WinRM, you have a few options to secure this. Either you make sure you keep the network used for this communication totally separate from any and all other communication through the use of firewalls, or you could get a certificate from a CA and set up WinRM manually. After allowing this script to run, we have now completed the Windows side setup to allow communication using WinRM. The next step is going back to our Ubuntu Ansible server and making the hosts known to Ansible by giving their IP addresses. Ansible works with a host file in /etc/Ansible. In this host file, you define the IPs of your clients. It is also possible to use a local host file, but for this tutorial we will stick to the global host file. You can group hosts together in this host file by enclosing the name of the group in braces above it. The IPs of my Windows VMs are 192.168.56.104 and .107. Thus I add these to the file. After adding in the hosts, we must also set some variables to be used for the communication. The ones you will need to change are the following. Ansible user. You need to set it to the Windows user that had administrator rights with which you configured your Windows. Ansible password. You must set this to the password of the Windows user that has the administrator rights. Ansible WinRM server cert validation. You need to change this assuming you did set up an actual certificates. If you didn't, you should simply leave this as ignore. All of this will also, of course, be available in the description. Having set up everything, it is now time for the big payoff, the successful test at the end of every installation. We're going to do this using a special module called WinPing. It is a ping, but it uses Ansible to communicate. Don't worry too much about the work module just yet. You'll hear more about that in the next video. Sometimes it takes a while to test with WinPing, so wait at most 5 minutes to see if you get a response from your hosts. I have sped this video up by a factor of 4, so you have some idea of how long it can take. As I got a response from both hosts, we can clearly see the connection works. In the next video, I will be explaining Ansible modules to you. Hope to see you there.